Somewhere along the northern edge of the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland, behind chain-link fences, security gates, and watchtowers half hidden by dense woodland, sat a military installation that most Americans had never heard of. Edgewood Arsenal. To those who worked there, it was a research campus. To the soldiers who arrived by bus and truck in the early 1950s, it was something harder to define. The Cold War had transformed American military thinking. The Soviet Union had nuclear weapons. Intelligence reports suggested chemical and biological programs operating behind the Iron Curtain. Washington needed answers, and the United States Army believed that some of those answers could only be found through direct human research. The logic inside the Pentagon was straightforward, if uncomfortable. Chemical agents behaved differently in the human body than they did in laboratory animals. If the Army wanted to understand how an enemy might use these substances on the battlefield and how American soldiers might be protected against them, they needed human subjects. The chemical core at Edgewood Arsenal became the center of that effort. Beginning in the late 1940s and accelerating through the 1950s and into the 1970s, the program enrolled thousands of military personnel in research studies. The Army would later estimate that somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 soldiers participated across the full duration of the program. The substances studied ranged from nerve agents and mustard compounds to psychochemical agents, sedatives, stimulants, and hallucinogens. The laboratories at Edgewood looked like any serious government research facility of the era. Fluorescent lights hummed above long metal tables covered with glass instruments, beakers, centrifuges, and rows of carefully labeled containers. Scientists in white coats moved between stations, recording observations on clipboards, speaking into reel-to-reel recording devices, and consulting with uniformed military officers. Observation rooms with one-way glass allowed researchers to monitor participants without direct interaction. Medical instruments measured heart rate, respiration, and neurological response. Everything was documented, everything was filed. The bureaucratic machinery of mid-century American science ran quietly and efficiently inside those walls. The men who came to Edgewood were volunteers, at least in the formal sense. Recruitment happened through official military channels. Soldiers were told they would be participating in research to help develop protective equipment and medical countermeasures. Some accounts from veterans describe being told very little beyond that. Others recall being given general information about the nature of the studies. What they were not always told, according to later investigations, was the specific identity of every substance being administered, or the full range of potential effects. For many of these men, the assignment felt like a duty. They were soldiers. They had been asked to contribute to national defense in a laboratory rather than on a battlefield. Among the many agents studied at Edgewood, one became particularly associated with the program in later historical accounts. The compound designated BZ, or 3-quineuclidinyl benzylate, was a psychochemical agent capable of producing profound disorientation, hallucinations, and temporary incapacitation. The Army was interested in its potential as a non-lethal incapacitating weapon. Soldiers administered BZ in controlled research settings experienced effects that could last for hours or longer. Researchers observed and recorded their responses carefully. From a purely scientific standpoint, the data collected was considered valuable. From the perspective of the participants, the experience was often deeply disorienting, and in some cases, frightening. Decades later, when veterans began speaking publicly about their experiences at Edgewood, a central question emerged. What had they actually been told before participating? The concept of informed consent, as it is understood today, with detailed disclosure of risks, the right to withdraw, and independent ethical review, was not consistently applied in military research programs of that era. The Nuremberg Code, established after the Second World War, had outlined principles for ethical human experimentation. But its application within classified military programs remained inconsistent. Some veterans reported that they had signed consent forms but had not been given meaningful information about what they were consenting to. Others said they had felt implicit pressure as military personnel to participate without complaint. For many of the men who passed through Edgewood, the years that followed raised new concerns. Some veterans reported persistent health problems and psychological difficulties that they believed were connected to their participation in the program. Establishing a direct causal link proved difficult. The classified nature of the research meant that many participants did not know exactly what they had been given, making medical follow-up complicated. In the 1970s, congressional investigations and journalistic reporting began to bring the program into public view. Senate hearings examined the ethical dimensions of the research. Veterans organizations pushed for greater transparency and access to their own medical records. It is important to be precise about what the historical record actually documents. The Edgewood Arsenal program was a real, officially sanctioned military research effort. Thousands of soldiers did participate. Psychochemical and pharmacological agents were administered to human subjects. Questions about the adequacy of informed consent are legitimate and have been raised by serious historians, congressional investigators, and medical ethicists. At the same time, the program was not a single uniform experience. It spanned more than 2 decades, involved many different researchers, and studied a wide range of substances under varying conditions. Not every participant reported lasting harm. Not every researcher acted without regard for the welfare of subjects. The full picture is complex, and responsible historical analysis requires holding that complexity rather than collapsing it into a simple narrative. What Edgewood Arsenal ultimately forces us to confront is a question that did not begin with the Cold War and has not ended with it. When a soldier volunteers for military service, they accept risks that ordinary citizens do not. When that soldier is then asked to participate in medical or scientific research, how much additional risk is acceptable? How much information are they owed? The tension between national security imperatives and individual rights does not resolve itself easily. It lives inside the documents still held in government archives, inside the testimony of veterans who are still alive, and inside the ongoing work of historians trying to understand what happened behind those fences in Maryland. Today, the former Edgewood Arsenal facility is part of Aberdeen Proving Ground. The laboratories are gone or repurposed. The observation rooms are empty. Archival documents, some still partially redacted, sit in government files. The experiments at Edgewood Arsenal were designed to answer questions about chemical warfare. Decades later, they left behind another question. How much should a soldier have to sacrifice in the name of national security? Dark Experiments, Episode 7,